What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Weisz.
Dr. Jeremy Weisz here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. And today's guest, I'm going to introduce formally in a second, Scott Becker of Becker's Healthcare. And, you know, Scott, I like to mention past episodes people should check out. And over the past, decade, Scott's been doing this for a long time as well. I have had some really interesting guests on. I had a couple weeks ago the co-founder of Pixar. And so I suggest people check that episode out when it comes out. He was talking about Steve Jobs and George Lucas and kind of founding of the original Pixar. It was really interesting. Other past guests include Julie Clark, who started Baby Einstein. She talked about how she grew it from 5 employees to $20 million in a very short period of time, then sold it to Disney. But the most impressive part was she calls herself the cancer assassin. She beat cancer twice, and just hearing about her journey, sometimes we don't hear about the personal struggles and tough points along with building a company, which is always there and it's always tough. So check out more episodes at InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. We help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And we do that by helping you run your podcast. And what for me, as Scott knows, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, profile them, profile what they're doing and what their company is doing, and shout it from the rooftop. So if you've thought about doing one, you could email us and go to rise25.com. Today's guest, Scott Becker, has been running Becker's Healthcare for over 30 years and is a partner of McGuireWoods. And I'm going to let Scott talk a little bit about, because Becker's Healthcare is this amazing company, and they have so many different moving pieces, from the digital pieces to the events pieces. Past speakers of the conferences include George Bush, Hillary Clinton, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and so many more. Scott, thanks for joining me.
Jeremy, thank you so much. And what a privilege to get to visit with you. Again, Scott Becker, founder, publisher of Becker's Healthcare, which those that are not in healthcare, publication for hospitals, health systems, and we've got a few other core verticals, and been around for 30 plus years. I'm also a lawyer, but it's so embarrassing is having gone to Harvard. I have to say it within 30 seconds of being on any discussion. Harvard Law School graduate, so embarrassing. I apologize. And also, partnered at a law firm called McGuireWoods, which is a large AmLaw firm, and also served on the board of directors for a long time, served as the national chair of our healthcare practice for a long time. And a lot of my life is revolved around, whether law or in the media business, around healthcare. And so we follow the COVID, the Delta variant, all those things very, very closely with the impact on hospitals, health systems, as well as in the live conference business. Also, separately, you've got some other media properties around private equity and business and digital properties and so forth. So, Jeremy, just a pleasure to get to visit with you today. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to digging in deep on this amazing offshoot from lawyer to Becker's Healthcare. But I wanted to start back in, you mentioned the Harvard days, and I didn't know this until about 10 minutes ago, that you have an interesting connection when you were at Harvard.
So I was a teaching assistant and taught moot court, and that's sort of the legal competition for writing and presenting and so forth. And as a third-year law student, they use third years to help teach and guide and advise. And so of the 12 students I had, 2 of them were one was the son of a world famous judge, or Richard Posner, the son Eric Posner, and the other one that was in my class out of the 12 was a gentleman, Barack Obama, President Obama. And so I had this wonderful thing of having 12 students in the class, and Eric Posner and Barack. I was this young University of Illinois graduate who went to Harvard Law School, and Eric and Barack were literally, you in any group you're in, there are people that are much brighter than the other people, and Eric and Barack were those people. And so I would try and explain things to the class about legal writing or about presenting and so forth. And we would constantly get the situation where Barack or Eric would say, and they would do it in the nicest, most politically appropriate way. I think what Mr. Becker is trying to say is this. And like, as opposed to being offended, they handled it so well and were so correct and so right on. They clearly should have been teaching the class, not myself, that I would have to say, that's exactly right. That's what I meant. And the class became almost like, in my own mind, like a Saturday Night Live skit where I would be like Chris Farley and they would be explaining things and I'd be like, that's right. And they were, and they were right on. And Barack, whether agree with his politics or not, and some of them I agree with, some I don't agree with, but was, literally had this tremendous way about him and truly a pleasure of a person and crazily bright. And the only reason I always mention Eric Posner in the same sentence, because Eric was also his dad is this famous judge, Richard Posner, and Eric is now a law professor someplace and also crazily bright. And they would literally, they would literally take over the class that I was supposedly teaching or advising on and so forth. And they were just like gifted in every single way. And Barack is a gifted, whether agree with this politics or not, just a gifted person and a pleasure to be around as a person.
That is wild. I love that. Talk about the transition from lawyer. I mean, you're still a lawyer, but to the kind of digital and events that we know of as Becker's Healthcare.
Sure. So when I was a young lawyer, and there's a whole history to this, there were two or three things that came into this. As a young lawyer, you learn early on that you ultimately are far better off in terms of having control of your life if you've brought clients into the firm, if you're part of the fabric of bringing clients in versus not. And that's
you're
not
a rainmaker, like someone who's a rainmaker
versus not. And so what happens in law firms is you're very valuable in law firms if you're a rainmaker. You're also crazily valuable in law firms if you manage lots of people. There's different ways to say to be very valuable. There's three sort of core ways. You're just so great at what you do. You're a rainmaker or you manage tons of people. Early on in my career, when I was at huge firm, the people that did not have some control of their lives, they didn't manage lots of business or they didn't bring in lots of business, were treated so poorly that I became very motivated very early to build a legal practice, to build a business where ultimately I became a rainmaker and a manager. And as part of doing that, I started sort of doing these small conferences and newsletters around a sector in healthcare. And that was it was a very small effort. It's really aimed at marketing my law practice. And that was the sort of genesis of Becker's Healthcare, which started really 30 years ago now. And now Becker's Healthcare became a very valuable media property. It really became much more valuable 12, 15 years after I started it, when I started hiring people full-time in that business and grew that business into a serious business. And that business now, it covers, and it's one of the most widely read newsletters, digital and otherwise, in hospitals and health systems, surgery centers, orthopedics and spine, then health IT and revenue cycle. And it was really built around niches and a great leadership team. Like many successful businesses, it was built originally for a different purpose. And then I was at least paying enough attention to understand, this can be a real business. And at some point it became a real business. Now has, depending on what day it is, not huge, but 70 to 80 employees, has 6 major conferences a year. Of course, the conference has been shelved for the last year or two. And then, tons of different digital properties. And has just been a great fun and a labor of love and successful as well. It's been really fantastic. While I was building the media company, I was also practicing law and building client base, building teams. And I guess some of the lessons that come out of all of it is, it's very hard to do anything significant without great people and great teams. Like I'm a huge subscriber to the old Jim Collins Good to Great concept of everything comes with, first and foremost, great people and great teams, and then clarifying strategy and what you're trying to do. But that was sort of the genesis of the media company called Becker's Healthcare, and it's we've got great leadership there, and the CEO, Jessica Cole, the editorial teams, the leadership teams, the sales teams, key account management teams, events teams, and so forth. So it's been just a great A great pleasure. It's given me a chance to interact with everybody from top CEOs in healthcare to presidents and athletes and so forth that we use as keynote speakers for our events. And it has really been a great, great experience in so many ways. Jeremy, let me turn it back to you before I keep
I'm
talking.
I want to dig into some of the things that have stuck out with some of these keynote speakers, but I wanted to just ask for a second, and I don't know what website we should point people towards. I know there is asccommunications.com where you can see kind of Becker's Healthcare. They have the ASC review, hospital review, spine review, dental plus DSO review, clinical leadership and infection control. Are there any other places what other places should we send them online to check out more?
No, thank you. I mean, the easiest place to do is to go to, if you just Google Becker's Healthcare or Becker's Hospital Review. Becker's Hospital is really the flagship property within the Becker's Healthcare media business. And so Becker's Hospital Review, is the easiest place to go. And then there are a lot of other secondary or offshoot properties and so forth. But the sort of banner or flagship is Becker's Hospital Review. It would go to that.
Got it. Yeah. I'm on beckershospitalreview.com. You could check it out. And on the top, you could see all those pieces: hospital, spine, clinical, health, IT, CFO, dental, plus DSO and everything else. So check that out. What's interesting is you saw something originally. You wanted to build this amazing book of business, be invaluable to whatever firm you're a part of, build your own firm. And what comes out of it is something that you're like, this is an actual separate business. At what point did you realize that? What was the traction you were seeing that you go, I need to get a whole, because again, like a lot of lawyers, they're maybe working 60, 80, 100 hours a week. They don't have any time to build a separate business, let alone, the business that they're doing. So I'd love to hear how you can manage all that. But when did you first see there's something else here that I need to build something around?
So this is a great question. This is a great question. There was an aha moment, quite frankly. So the business was going fine. It was going well. It was really built around a couple newsletters and a couple conferences for literally 10 to 15 years. There was a point in time where it was just naturally, we outsourced everything in the business. I was still a lawyer and still am at a major law firm, a great law firm. And, I was outsourcing everything to a company that was doing, running the meetings, helping me run the newsletter. And I was sort of the chief content officer, which is really the role I still have today. And it became clear people were asking to buy more stuff from us, to do more stuff with us. And we just didn't really have the team or capacity to do it. So that was one part of it. But a bigger part of it was, I'm always an avid reader and was reading, one day about Comdex, was just the consumer, electronics show. And the Consumer Electronics Show ended up being, a $900 million property or some crazy number. And it was really the beginning of the fortunes for, one of these guys and who ended up being a casino magnate and all those kinds of things too. And I was like, wow, this could actually be a real business, not just sort of like illegal marketing thing, not just sort of whatever. And because the business was already making money, I was able to start. And it's not that I had aspirations like that, but it was an aha moment that this is actually a real business, not just something that makes some money and helps me build a legal brand, but a real business. And at that point, I sort of decided I had to make a choice. Am I going to keep on outsourcing everything, or am I going to start building a team around it? And then there were a number of, fortunate things that happened in starting to build a team, that sort of emerged. The most valuable employee ended up being a person who's my CEO and partner today, who was the niece of a client. I was looking for some help. I was looking for people for internships, for help, just trying to start to figure this out as a real business versus outsourcing everything. And she came to work with me when she was in college and was so far ahead of all the people I had hired that within several years, she became, chief of sales and chief executive officer, and was just a real big part of the success of the company, because was able to take sort of what I'd done on the content side and build teams and commercialize it in a different way and so forth. But there were different aha moments. There was, we're making some money. We start to read about people in this conference business that make real money. And then we started to hire people. And it was, ultimately so much of everything comes down to, are you in the right place and do you have the right people? So we ultimately at some point ended up for some period of time in the right place with the right people, and we're able to grow significantly. And we then, we made a lot of decisions, enough good ones versus bad ones. We made plenty of bad ones, but some of the good ones were, we really focused on digital events. We really focused on outsourcing everything but our core competencies. There were a number of decisions that we made. We didn't put too much ego into it. There's a magnificent competitor in our business that has the leading print magazine, and we were able to early on decide we can't fight that. We have to try and win digitally, not in print, because we just couldn't afford it, and we didn't want to take an outside capital on all those kinds of things. We studied some other things, and we came to the decision we wanted to be deep in a few areas, not spread so thin. And so we made some good decisions, we made some bad decisions, but there was an aha moment where we decided we could build a team, we can go after this could be fun, and it was really interesting. But there were some of those aha moments. It's a great question, and sorry for blabbering on, Jeremy.
No, I love that. And it's like, a big shift is you actually just decided. I mean, you saw this could be something and you saw the opportunity. And that's what I love about listening to other podcasts or reading books. It just gives you a frame. Like almost everyone started from scratch or somewhat near scratch, and they turned it into something. And you saw, wow, well, if anyone, I don't know how much square footage the Consumer Electronics Show takes up, but it's huge. I mean, all the biggest companies, a lot of the biggest companies electronically in the world are there. And it's like, well, they started from that. I can do that too. And then you built a team around it. And I'd love to hear, how did you decide? And you saw, okay, there's maybe some spaces that were taken over. And what does winning digitally look like? So you're like, well, there's people who have these print magazines. We're not going to compete there. What did you decide your core competency was going to be? And then I would love to hear about winning digitally.
So what happened was, when we really got going in earnest, there's this magnificent Cranes communication publication called Modern Healthcare. And they had a weekly forever, and they were sort of the leader in weekly print publications. And a weekly print publication to put out, extremely expensive, extremely, people intensive, and just very, it's a real thing. And they had magnificent advertising in it. And they were built by the Cranes family's whole family publication, but a great publication in healthcare. And we decided at some point that we couldn't, win against them there. I just couldn't afford it, quite frankly, amongst all other things. And so we chose that we would try and be the most sort of viewed website and the most read emails digitally in terms of a digital publication. Digital publication meant, a very, very busy website, very, very busy digital newsletters that get read a lot, and then ultimately we ended up in the events business too, and destination conferences. Our conferences were never really Comdex, but conferences when they're going well, 5,000-10,000 people would come to them, and we would attract a lot of the top leaders in the healthcare sector to speak at them, and then great sponsor and advertiser support for them. But winning digitally was what really came down to, is our website the most read website in the business or not? And for the business of healthcare, and that's really what we aimed at and where we got to. And it was a fascinating sort of development and a lot of thinking, building a great editorial team. We've got, I think, 25 full-time writers led by Molly Gamble, and then Ayla Ellison and Laura Durda, magnificent editorial team. But literally building an editorial team and really focusing on how do we win digitally. And this was, again, 15, 17 years ago. It's a much harder thing to start today and do today with limited resources. Today, you need massive resources to do this because there's just so much digital traffic, digital overflow, digital everything. But at the time, there wasn't that focus. So we were able to build significant digital properties with great editorial teams and great distributions. That's what digital winning looks like. Are you the busiest website in your area? Do people follow your website? Do they look at it constantly? Do they have a reason to? Are they getting the news they need to do whatever they do? And that's what winning digitally looked like.
How do, Scott, who are ideal to be viewing Becker's Hospital Review.com and all the assets? And then I'd love to hear how people engage can engage with you, whether it's free or paid? Because I know you have a lot of new e-newsletters people can sign up for.
Yeah.
You have physical conferences. Talk about some of the who should be going to your site. If someone knows of someone or someone is someone should be going to your site. And then
absolutely. So you've asked 3 or 4 magnificent questions there. So first, all the websites and the electronic distribution is all free. It was one of the decisions we made a long time ago that we wouldn't have a paywall, and that's how we would win, having the amount of people reading our websites, reading our electronic newsletters and so forth. So it's all the electronic stuff is free. And so we made a bet a long time ago that we had to live or die with our advertisers, our sponsors, and so forth, because the advertisers and sponsors are what, of course, allows us to keep the lights on to make it all work. But everything is free. So if you go to Becker's Healthcare, you can go to the website. You can go to the website as many times as you want to. You can go to the newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter as many times as you want to, and it's all free. Now, the focus of the newsletter is the business of healthcare, really. And so if you're the people that read it, the target audience are hospital executives, hospital leaders, hospital nurse managers, hospital chief executive officers, hospital CFOs, whatever. And we have different lines for each of those, but within the hospital sector, it would be chief information officer, chief operating officer. But hospital leadership, we have other physician lines, orthopedic and spine, where, for example, the reader would be an orthopedic physician, a spine surgeon, whoever it might be. We have gastroenterology. We have a number of other lines, but the big lines are hospital and health systems, health IT and revenue cycle, surgery centers, orthopedics, and spine. And the readers are sort of the people leading in those areas. And then the advertisers and sponsors are people that need to reach those people. And that's the core of it. We already talked about no paywalls, and that's how one of the things that helped us really grow our audience. We've talked about who the readership is, and then anybody who wants to subscribe or wants to reach me can always find me. I mean, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I respond. Anybody messages me, we respond almost immediately. People can text me. It's easy to find me.
So the other ways people, that's great. Other ways people can engage, so they can sign up for the free newsletters. You also have in-person and virtual conferences too.
Yes,
right.
we have traditionally very, very large in-person conferences. We have 6 large in-person conferences a year. Those are, of course, right now, it's touch and go. We just had to move our September conference, which is a health IT conference, where both Shaquille O'Neal was speaking, as well as Nikki Haley was speaking, and Howard Dean was speaking. We just had to move that to virtual, just based on the growth of the Delta variant right now and what's happened with COVID-19 and so forth. We're still touch and go on our October, November conferences. Those conferences people could find on our websites and attend in person. And so that's.
It should just be in person, Scott. It's like BYOHS, bring your own hazmat suit. Everyone just, they probably have access to them. Everyone just brings a hazmat suit and you have an in-person conference.
100%. So some conferences are still going on. They hit this window between things really opening up and now getting a little tighter again. And some conferences will continue to go on where, require everybody to be vaccinated, show a negative COVID test. And we could do that. We've got the challenge of, so many hospitals and health systems, which are the core tenants of our conferences, are overwhelmed with COVID cases.
They're overloaded.
And so if we end up having a conference and we add to that problem versus help that problem, it becomes sort of like not being a good citizen in our industry, and we live in our industry.
Yeah.
And so it is what it is.
I could see that. Yeah. They're overwhelmed.
We have to make sure, Yes. We have to make sure we have 3 or 4 core constituents. One is that hospital audience of health system leaders. 2 is our vendors and advertisers, and 3 is our team. And ultimately, we got to come down to what works for all of those constituencies every time. And so at this point in time, we're moving our September conference to virtual, and all terrific, all good. I mean, all good, and they'll be fine. I mean, we miss being in person, but it's all good.
Talk about some past speakers. We mentioned if presidents. We mentioned Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You've had the chance to interview these people on stage. Who are some of the people that stick out and maybe some of the lessons learned?
Sure. And so there are, one of the things you find amongst all of these speakers, whether it's uh, President Clinton, President Bush, Hillary Clinton, Nikki Haley, Venus Williams, Bill Walton. We've had just tons of celebrity, Tucker Carlson, is that all of these speakers have tremendous personal skills. They generally don't get to where they are without having tremendous personal skills. And there will be people that you might have come up with your own narrative in your own mind about based on what you listen to on TV, what you listen to in person, and what what you've heard. And what you find when you meet almost all of these people, almost entirely, is they are just a pleasure to be with. And that's partly how they've become so successful. So if you start out in a centrist household and thought Hillary was difficult or Hillary was this, when you visit with Hillary Clinton, you find that she is just a absolute pleasure to be with as a person. It's like unexpectedly a pleasure. Like you would, if you're going to have somebody over for dinner, I mean, you'd almost prefer Hillary to Bill because she's just as a pleasure to be with, just like a very nice, warm, pleasant person. And you see why she was so well liked and became so well respected and everything. You meet, you meet people like, oh goodness, and George Bush, also just an absolute pleasure of a person, just a pleasure to be with. Nikki Haley, terrific leader, what have you, but sounds like she's talking always from talking points versus like having a conversation with you. People like Tucker Carlson, notwithstanding the narrative on TV, a pleasure to be with and a more balanced thinker than what you get on TV. And so you'd find like Tucker doesn't quite meet the mold that you see on TV. Hillary for sure doesn't. It's just an absolute pleasure to be with. Then people like Bill Walton, what was
he like?
Schwarzenegger. Bill Walton just is like a fascinating, person. Many of these people are paid for a speech and they're paid to come. I mean, they're all paid to come and they're all paid to be there. And then some of them, the moment they're done, are gone. And we learned years ago, you have to pay for them also to walk the exhibit hall, to visit and do pictures with your customers and your VIPs and all those things. But some of them, regardless whether you're paying or not, for the extras, will just give 100%. So Bill Walton is like that. Sugar Ray Leonard is like that. You pay them, and they stay for hours when they're not required to. They give you so much value. They try so hard. They're just and people enjoy being with them because they enjoy being there. We've had so many different speakers. Obviously, it's a highlight for me to get to interview Bill Clinton, George Bush, Hillary Clinton, and others, and some of our great editorial editors have had the chance to do that as well. Just what strikes me as the overwhelming sort of like, personal talents of these people. I mean, you understand if you visit with so many of them. Oh, got it. I could see why people that, what you see something different than you just see on TV where they're painted as a narrative by whoever you watch, Fox or CNN, whatever it is, or MSNBC, whatever it is that you watch. But in person, many of them are just normal. They're normal people that have been highly successful. And many of them feel very much like normal people. Some of them feel like they're still operating, still on the make, but most don't. Most feel like they're just a, unusual pleasure to be with, but there's a reason. They've got crazy personal skills. I enjoyed visiting with Venus Williams almost as much as anybody. Like in person, was tremendously humble, a little anxious, a little nervous at first, and then just an absolute pleasure to be with. I mean, but you see so much of that. Like
it's wild to think that, right? That it's someone so top of their game and world that they can be so humble and somewhat nervous, right? Because they've been in just pressure situations.
Yes. And some of them are so good at this. Like George Bush is so good at it. Like he makes sure that whoever's interviewing, he sits down with them before, and he doesn't do it to make sure he's comfortable. He does it more to make sure the interview is going to be comfortable. Sometimes we have, different people interviewing, and they're very, very thoughtful in how they handle it. And some more, it's just, you're just doing like, I remember originally the first time we had Bobby Knight, Bobby Knight has spoken for us a few different times now, but the first time he came, he spoke for 40 minutes. We asked him to walk the exhibit hall, and he's like, not in my contract, and so I'm not doing it. But then 5-7 years later, he had mellowed some and was just an absolute pleasure. And it was just a pleasure. And
Right.
would call before from the golf course, say, Scott, what are we talking about? What are we going to do? And just a total pleasure. And then, you saw a softer side of him. We were on a panel one time with him and Mike Ditka, Coach Ditka. And Coach Ditka, unfortunately, we've seen Coach Ditka recently. It's very hard for him. He's not nearly as sharp as he was. He's got, whether dementia or Alzheimer's or challenges. And Bobby Knight, constantly went out of his way on a panel with the two of them to try and make Coach Ditka look good, to make him feel good and look good. And you see a totally different part of Bobby Knight than many people have seen on TV or I saw originally. And that was just fascinating. Bobby Knight, he's so past the time at which people are, but Bobby Knight was the original sort of the general, he was called, a cheer throwing coach, like of the old school. And you saw him very humanized in person. And you see that with a lot of people that have been made into characters on TV. Like Hillary's been made into a character by certain stations. You meet her in person, you could not visit with a nicer person. Tucker Carlson, sort of a character on TV. You meet him in person, and it's hard to visit with a nicer person. And I know he's playing a role now and stuff like that. And Hillary plays a role of bashing the Republicans. Tucker plays a role of bashing the Democrats. But in person, they're much more balanced, and it's fascinating to watch that as well.
I'd love to hear too. Thanks for sharing those. Some of your mentors in the industry or colleagues that you respect in some lessons, because I know we have a few more minutes, but I do want to point people towards beckershospitalreview.com. They could check out more. And it's amazing to hear some of the speakers you've had, because I remember, one of my favorite books are by John Wooden on leadership and sports. And a lot of the Audible version, some of the beginning part is read by Bill Walton, who was one of the players under John Wooden. And so I'm sure you have some just treasure trove of information and speakers and sessions on the website. So people should check it out. From your perspective, Scott, who are some of the mentors or colleagues that stick out to you through your journey?
Sure. So there's really three different people from three different places that had given me sort of great advice at different points. And, I could go through a bunch of them, but there was a gentleman who ran the department that I was in at the law firm who was very big on building niche businesses, niche practices. And that appealed to me. So I sort of followed that lead in building my original healthcare practice around a niche. The second person, and I'll go through four very quickly, who had great influence on me, was a young lawyer who worked for me named Marcelo Corpus. And when I was a young lawyer, the way of these big law firms is if you wanted to get something done, you were sort of harsh or very direct to the people that were junior to you. And it was I was probably 5 years out of school, but I was, of course, how it works in these law firms. I was bossing around a person who's 2-3 years out of school, and I yelled at a different person. And Marcelo took me aside. He was a young lawyer at the time and said to me, when you yell at somebody, it might help for this moment, but it creates a cancer in the organization in the long term. So it affects not just that person, it affects everybody else. And it was so inspirational to me and so informative to me that I basically got yelling and bossing out of my repertoire. Now it's about 30 years ago, but it was life-changing for me. It was literally in a moment I was able to change how I dealt with people and realized and not that I'm always perfect, but it completely took me out of that way of managing or trying to get things done for the rest of my career. And it was just inspirational and telling for me. And it took the courage of this young lawyer to tell me, this is really bad behavior, and it's bad for all of us, Scott. It's not just maybe it gets us done today for the client, but it's bad for all of us in the long term of building the team you want to build. And it was really, really helpful. The third person is a guy, Jerry Peters, who's a lawyer at a different firm. And when I was trying to build a practice, he was very clear to me, like Jim Collins says about good to great, that everything is about building great teams. It's impossible doing anything serious without great teams. And Jerry Peters sat me down and gave me that advice. There were other people as well that were very inspirational. Of course, mom and dad have been magnificent. in terms of encouraging and so forth. Then there was a vice chancellor of student affairs at U of I who was, when I went through some challenging times, was very, very helpful to me in sort of thinking through how I rebounded, resiliency, and so forth. A guy named Stan Levy, and was very helpful to me in a million ways in terms of mentoring me and thinking through things and so forth. So those are four of the people that had specific direct influences on me. This guy, Bob Priste from the law firm, Marcella Corpus. There was a woman, Yvette Harmon, who's also a driven, terrific leader at our law firm. Marcella Corpus and Jerry Peters were all really helpful. And then Stan Levy from, when I was in college and then throughout life has been helpful to me in terms of just thinking through things and approaching things and resilience and so forth. But those are some of the mentors that have been really helpful to me.
Amazing. Scott, first of all, thank you. I know you're a very busy man. You're running all these entities. So I just want to thank you for sharing your lessons, your knowledge, your stories. Everyone should go to beckershospitalreview.com. Check out more. Their e-newsletters. They have the same number of e-newsletters. They have podcasts. So check out their podcasts. They have a treasure trove of podcast episodes too. And they have a link to the podcast on the beckershospitalreview.com. That and many more. Check it out. Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate you.
Jeremy, just a pleasure to visit with you. Thanks so much for having me on. And what a great job you do and what you do. What a pleasure to visit with you. Thank you very much.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.